I mean, if you want to start recording, I can do the introduction. All right. Welcome everyone to the second session of Corequisite course building with our folks and friends from the University of Central Arkansas, Keith and Leslie. If I need to say hello to Keith and Leslie. They've both been working there, developing these courses for the last few years. So we're back with them for the second session. So thank you all very much. What we'll do is I'm going to turn it over to them. And between Missy and I, we'll try to answer some stuff going on in the chat. And we'll have a great session like we did for the first one a couple of weeks ago. So thank you all, everybody, for coming. Keith, Leslie?
Okay, let me get my share thing up here. Oops, let's see. And where'd it go? Let's see. Let me close this back. I did not want to do it there. Let's see if I can get this. There we go. Okay, there we go. So yeah, we're back for round two, wanting to go into a little bit more depth with you guys. Last time we just focused on kind of our background information, what was Corequisite, and talked about some placement and some content issues and ideas with you guys. And so today what we want to do is go into a lot more depth into how we can design these Corequisite courses, what they can look like, and what kind of choices you kind of have when you start to design these. So this is where it starts to become fun and can really become challenging at the same time. So please feel free to ask questions as they pop in your mind. We'll be happy to answer those and kind of give you our take on what we've kind of done. So to kind of follow up, there was our first one that we did last time. What is a Corequisite and why we went into it, our placement policies, and then placement policies that you guys can use, and then how to develop your Corequisite content. So hopefully you've kind of thought about those things as you've left the first one and had some ideas for your stuff. If there's questions about those, also feel free to ask, because we'll be more than happy to jump into those. And then for today, we'll talk about logistics, both designing and scheduling those, attendance and grade policies that are useful, and then a little bit of assessment just to kind of give you some ideas for it. But really, that's what the majority of webinar 3 will be about. We'll be assessing your Corequisite. So just to kind of lead you into that. So again, a little bit about our university, just so you kind of remind what may be the similar and what may be a little bit different. So we have around 13,000 students, or 11,000 students, 2,000 first-time freshmen, 24 ACT, and about 350, 360 that need remedial math. It's closer to 200 that need remedial English. And then our department is 13 full-time faculty, 6 of us are math. We usually have 0 to 1, usually 1 in the fall, and then we don't have any adjuncts in the spring. Just in our math faculty, it's over 75 years of teaching experience. Between our department, it's well over 100 years of experience teaching. And then just to give you a hook again about staying with us on what we've done, we'll give you our data on what our data was prior to Corequisites. We had by ACT score an overall success rates in the 20s, and then after an implementation of Corequisites, our success rates were in the 80s. So we've seen some really strong numbers by ACT score, and we've seen some other places that have really similar data from this. Saw one from Tennessee actually just yesterday that was really similar. So this is pretty comparable to other institutions. So know that this is possible for you guys. So let's see. So just to kind of review a few key terms that we might use several times today. One of them is commingled, or just a mingled approach, where we have students who are placed in a course with non-transitional or non-remedial students. So there might be part that are just what you might call a traditional student, a regular student, and then those paired with or with students that are transitional. So that's a commingled definition. And then we also use the word pairing with credit-bearing courses. So we will put, sometimes they like to use the word cluster. We don't like to throw that word out because it can become confusing to faculty and advisors and admins. So cluster we try to stay away from, but we use the word pairing when we put courses together where students are kind of forced to enroll in both of them. So sometimes those pairings can be taught by the same instructor, or they can be two different instructors. So we might use the word co-taught if there's multiple instructors that are teaching different courses, but the courses are paired together. So just a few key terms there before we roll into other logistical items. So in 2014, we started our first co-requisite remediation, and that was in our quantitative literacy course. And so we had our first pilot designed solely around QL to start, just because our prior remediation needs were not being met with what we had as standalone remediation, as we talked about in the first webinar. So we had just one section of QL, and that was paired with one section of our foundations or our transitional. As you can see, the times are listed there and the days. So Tuesday, Thursday, 12:15 was our QL, and then Monday, Wednesday, Friday was the transitional. So we would call that a 5-day pairing of those courses. So the student was in mathematics 5 days a week. We had 38 students that were enrolled in the QL course. And then there was just 18 who were enrolled in the foundations piece of that. So that was a commingled approach. We had 20 students then that were non-transitional. The same instructor taught both of those for our pilot. We used the same instructor. And 100% of those students in the foundations course passed the quantitative literacy course. And we use the word pass here as a D. At our institution, a D gets a degree. That's what we've always said. Here, we know it does not transfer though. So sometimes we'll use C rates or D rates. We like to be very specific on those when we do lay those out. We will let you know which ones those rates are, just so that you know. But I believe there was only one student that did make a D in that course, so it wouldn't be drastic. So just to kind of be fully transparent there. So based on 100% making a D, we knew that we had a pretty good idea of what we were doing with our co-requisites. So we used that same approach over the course of 2014 to develop one for our college algebra. And we did it second, mainly because our prior remediation was not as dire. It was a decent approach to remediation at the time. But obviously the numbers were not anywhere as strong as what we were seeing afterwards. But we thought we had a place where we could put that second. So during the 2014-2015 school year, we worked on our college algebra pilot. So in the fall of 2015, we piloted our first correct college algebra. And we actually did 4 sections of that. So we had 4 QL or FCAs paired with 4 CAs. Again, the foundations were capped at 20 seats. The college algebras were capped at 40 seats. So again, it was a commingled approach when we started. So we had several that had different instructors teaching them, and then one section where the same faculty taught both the foundations and the college algebra. So we did do some co-teaching in those, and then some that were the same. We had 78 students between all of those foundations. So if they were capped at 20, really we should have had 80, but a few of them did not get filled all the way. But 64% or 64 of them successfully completed both of those. So 82% made a D or higher on that pilot. So we were, again, very pleased with an 82% success coming from the 20s for completing college algebra in 1 year, up to 82%. We were very, very happy with that. So we knew we had some strong ideas behind our co-requisite approach. We didn't like some aspects of it and we'll start diving into some of those logistics coming up. But there were some things that we were really happy with, and then some things that we knew we needed to change to really make sure that we could do this to scale. So logistics. So the main goal of this is to help you guys figure out what kind of design that you can do at your institution. So as we kind of went through with our pilots are not what we do today. We still have some changes that we have made to those pilots. So just because you come up with a pilot does not mean that's what you're stuck with. So feel very secure in knowing that pilots are the places where you can make some mistakes, but hopefully based on what you guys are doing through this, you'll have some pretty good ideas of what to do and what not to do. So we hopefully will have some good examples for you guys to choose from and to pick from, and then go back and start working on it. So some logistical ideas that you need to kind of think about. One of the biggest things that we ran across from the beginning is scheduling of these. We wanted to figure out what would be the best way for our students to succeed first in the credit-bearing course, but then also get things from the transitional course that will help them in the credit-bearing course. So should those things occur on the same days? Should they occur on alternate days? We'll talk more about the data of these things as we go along, but your student makeup will also be a huge part of how many days a week that you need to meet. Sometimes students are all of your students are commuting in, and so it's hard to ask them to come 5 days a week or even 4 days a week. So that will play a part in your logistic decisions that you need to make. How big should those classes be? So we've seen courses that even the credit-bearing course, ours is maxed at 40, mainly because the math department wants those to be at 40 students. So we wanted to remain consistent with what they do. So we keep ours at 40. But how big should those developmental courses need to be? And we've seen, lots of research on keeping those as small as possible. And that is dependent upon some things that are outside of our control, maybe the ones above you or even above them even. So your course sizes need to be under consideration in this as well. And then those sizes also play an impact in course load for your faculty as well. And then with this class sizes, how many classrooms do you have? So we run into this problem every semester. We only have 4 classrooms that we can put 40 students in. And so we are really limited to 4 classes and the prime times. So most of our students are on campus and they want 10, 11, 12, and then that's it. That's all they would really like to be in class is the 10, 11, 12 o'clock hours. After lunch, they don't want to be in class, and before 9 o'clock, they don't want to be in class. So we have a big push for those times, and the most we can put at those times is 4. So we really have a limiting factor of how many rooms we can have. So that's one part of your decisions is the classroom sizes. And then how you pair those courses, and we'll talk more about commingled or transitional and the pairing of faculty and that kind of thing too as we go. But you know, when you start to look at the course design of your college algebra, a commingled approach, according to some of the ALP research, has always put out there that commingled approach was the best. And so we've done some research and we've done some experimenting on our own with that idea. And so we'll share what we kind of have landed on when it comes to a commingled or fully transitional. And then a computer lab, we have one computer lab for our whole department. And so that also factors into our scheduling. All of our faculty want to be in the lab. All of them want to be in there as much as possible. And so that makes it kind of a headache to try to get scheduled that way. So we end up having to do a lot of rotations of the lab and who's in there when. So just some ideas to throw out there to get your mind thinking about what could be logistical problems. So another major logistical thing that you'll have to decide is how many credits or credit hours that co-requisite course will be. At our institution, we landed on 3 credit hours for our transitional piece. Those credit hours are not for credit for graduation. They are part of their load for the semester for their financial aid hours, but they are not for graduation. So they're not progressing in a degree with those hours. But they are getting, because of the design, the 3 hours from the mathematics course or the writing course or the other gen ed course, maybe that something is paired with. So they are getting 3 credit hours. So they are access to 3 credit hours, as before they would only be in the transitional where they wouldn't have any hours. So there is that kind of goes for it. So that not having hours count for credit does impact how many hours you want it to be. We landed on 3 to start with. And that's one of the recommendations is always start bigger than what you might think you need. It's a lot easier to work backwards than to try to add to the hours. If we would have picked 1 or 2 hours and tried to add another hour later, we would have had probably a lot of students fail to start with, and then we would have a much tougher time trying to get those implemented because A, we would have had students failing and it would have looked really bad, and B, we would have been asking for more money for these students to take these courses to try to help them succeed. And so we started with 3 hours. Now we're talking about moving maybe back hour in some of our courses, or not doing anything with the ones that we are really confident in. So we have seen places that have added 1 hour either as a lab or a tutoring time on top of their credit bearing course. So they would have a college algebra course with review or with a lab. So they might even bump that 1 hour up for credit. We have seen institutions do a 4 hour, all 4 hours be credit. Instead of the 1 hour being not for credit. So you do have that option. We've seen a 2 hour, 1 hour lab and a 1 hour class that's added to or to the side of the 3 hour college algebra course or writing course. And then like we do a 3 hour class. We do have a 1 hour where we meet in a computer lab, but it's not a traditional lab hour, so we don't really call it a lab. And then sometimes you might have some combination of all of these. So we've seen an implementation of required tutoring time on top of a lab hour, on top of a class hour. So there are lots of ways to design this. And again, a lot of that will go back to what do you have access to at your institution. If you have the tutoring capabilities to have all of your students in the tutoring lab at times, great. That can be a helpful tool. If you've got enough computer labs to put them in every one of your sections in a lab for an hour, great. We didn't have all that access, so we had to be creative with what we did have. So feel free to use any of those. We've seen success out of all of those options. So and the hour requirements are very varied, just dependent upon what the student makeup is at your institution. So also, who will teach these co-requisite courses? So we talked a little bit about pairing those faculty up. So one of the things here at UCA, we have the math department, which is a separate entity from the Department of Student Transitions, which is who we are with. So they own the mathematics course. Our writing department at UCA owns the writing course. So we don't have control of those courses. We get to teach those courses. We are lucky enough to be able to do that. I know some institutions, we were just talking with one yesterday, they don't have the access to teach the credit-bearing course on their campus. So their transitional team only is able to teach the non-credit-bearing course. And sometimes that is based on their credentials, and then sometimes it's just based on choice of the institution. So who has access to teaching those? Who is allowed to teach those? Those will come into play before you even get to decide. You'll want to find out who can and who's going to be allowed to teach those credit-bearing courses on your campus. And then you can start deciding, can we make it where they have the same instructor for both courses? So at our institution, in our math department, or in our math part of our department, we teach both parts now. We do not do any instructor pairing, and that has been by choice. Our faculty, as we showed in our pilots, we did some initial pairings, and our faculty came back with wanting to do them themselves. And we'll talk about why a little bit later, but that's something that we have landed on, is that we teach the same. Now, our writing side, the writing folks are only allowed to teach consistently the transitional piece. So the writing department actually teaches the writing course. So that's even different within our own department. So, and then the literacy side, our literacy faculty teach our reading course, and then they're paired with a gen ed faculty. So, and for right now, they've all been paired in-house, but they're talking about reaching out to other faculty. So we have a combination of both co-taught and the same faculty even within our own department. So sometimes you're forced into using what the other people that you're teaching with or doing the courses for require you to do. So just keep that in mind. As we talked about, team taught, that might be an option. And then at UCA also, in our math side, we have some graduate teachers that teach the college algebra course. They don't do it for us, but they do it in the math department. So we know sometimes that your transitional team is paired with some GAs at times, so they might be a part of your co-requisite design. Also, adjuncts and tutors can be part, just depending upon what kind of design you land on. And remember to keep the hours that those guys have access to and are responsible for in mind as you start to design this, because that can throw a little wrinkle in it, just based on what you land on. So how you pair those is also critical. So in our system, we use Banner, and our courses have been paired, so that it makes it a lot easier on our advisors. So when they go to register for our transitional course, it's paired then with a credit-bearing course right off the bat. So they're not self-selecting multiple courses. It just made it easier for our advisors to get them scheduled. We have seen places that don't get into a lot of really specific pairings with their courses, and so they will just give the students access to days and times of courses and allow them to self-select into any of those courses. And the amount of coordination needed to do that is on the front end is a lot higher. So just be mindful of that, because if one kid is taking transitional with someone on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and then someone else on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and some other student in the transitional is on at a Tuesday, Thursday, and then taking a Monday, Wednesday, Friday for the other course, it's backwards. And so it can be very challenging to know where each student is in their course times. And so it just creates some interesting headaches that can arise when you walk into those courses. So keep that in mind when you go to start designing how those will be paired. And then also the pairings, will they be hard coded in your Banner system or in your system, or will they just be loosely done? In the past, we tried to hard code those in our system, and Banner sometimes is not very friendly when it comes to that. So we've had to just a lot of times put it in the notes that they're paired. And so that can create other issues in that advisors will only put them in one part of the pairing. And so we are constantly staying on top of those numbers to make sure that they are equal in both both parts of the pairings. So when you've done this a long time, you see just about everything. So that's something just to keep in mind if you don't hard pair them in the actual system. And then also, what's going to happen when you do put those together? Are all of the students going to be in the same co-requisite course together? Sometimes I know on our writing, those students are paired with the same instructor for their credit-bearing course. But they may not be in the same course at the same time. So we all know that every class runs just a little bit different. So some things are said just a little bit different between classes. And so students take things a little bit different between classes. So when they come to meet in the transitional piece, if the faculty asks them, what day or time that something might be due, students from different courses may have different answers to those questions. And so that can make things interesting if they're coming from different sections. So just keep that in mind when you're starting to think about how to put these together. And then how many students, and again, that can come back to how many can you have in your course based on your rooms, and what do you have for the number of faculty to teach those courses. All of that can play into what you have. And then how many days a week, as we talked about, I know a lot of this will depend upon your campus. Here we have a lot that are on campus, so we do like to keep them 5 days a week. but we have seen and we have done 3 days a week and 2 days a week. But commuting or people that do not live on campus and have to travel in obviously don't want to have to do that 5 days a week. And then also evening classes. I know that will be a little bit different. It'll be hard to do an evening section that is 2 days a week, but we have seen those and we have done those. So just be mindful that it is a possibility. So is this yours?
I think so.
Okay, good.
All right.
A lot of
So
talking.
I'm gonna talk to you about our move to full co-requisite and kind of how things went and happened, how things happened before and then after we looked at some data. So our designs for fall 2016, which is our first semester completely full co-requisite, they were just based off of convenience. Instructors said what times they wanted their classes, what days of the week, what rooms they wanted. There was no data at all as far as putting the schedule together. It was just sheer convenience. We learned real quick that didn't work. So sorry, I'm having to move some stuff out of the way. Here we go. So we had 6 foundations of quantitative literacy sections with 91 students. We had 19 sections of the foundations of college algebra with a total of 333 students. And we did it about 6 ways to Sunday. So some were commingled, meaning that they had transitional and non-transitional students in the credit-bearing class. Some were co-taught and some were taught by just a single instructor. And we had a variety of meeting days. I believe we've tried everything but 1 day a week. So we've tried 5 days a week, 4 days a week, 3 days a week, and 2 days a week. Mm-hmm. Morning, afternoon, prime time, and evening. So we kind of just did our convenience semester, we'll call it, fall 16. And then we had to decide, okay, that didn't work. And we had to look at some of these factors to decide what we were going to change for fall 17. How are we going to fix some things? And in order, we only had 6 faculty members at the time, and we had over 400 transitional students. In order to cover all of those transitional students with just our faculty, we could no longer provide seats for students who didn't need transitional courses. There just wasn't enough of us to go around with our loads. Mm-hmm. Our classroom sizes, again, you can see we really need a new building with all new classrooms that are big, because it's always an issue for us. This department and this building, it has always been designed for smaller classrooms. And so even those classrooms that fit 40, it's not a comfortable fit. And there's just no way we can increase that classroom size unless we knock down some walls or something. Mm-hmm. Our student makeup. I know our boss was really, really wanting us to consider fewer class meetings per week. She has a background in community colleges. I have a background in community colleges. We understand that commuter campuses, you just can't get students to come 5 days. So we really had to sit down and kind of run the numbers on, we can't all do 5-day-a-week courses. Other outside factors that contributed to some changes that we made, and this is really a big one. So before, when we were doing standalone remediation, we taught intermediate algebra, beginning algebra. Our success, if our students succeeded, then that sent a student over to the math department. That sent numbers, business, to the math department. Well, now when our students succeed, they get credit in their math course, which means they don't go to the math department, because remember, most of our students, college algebra is a terminal course. So not only are we not sending on average 400 students over there to the math department to take college algebra. If you'll recall, in fall 16, we actually taught some kids math that didn't need remediation at all. And so we kind of took 400 students from them, and then we taught an additional group of students that they could have taught. And so because it hurt our numbers for spring, because we didn't expect to pass 83% of our students, but then it also hurt their numbers in the spring because they were used to our successes moving on and needing to take the credit bearing class. So that led to us no longer taking any non-transitional math students into our courses. And again, like I said, most of our students don't take another math class, so we're really taking students away from them kind of permanently. Again, control of courses involved, we have none. And so I just want to go back to that for a second. We kind of landed on completely 100% transitional students in our courses. And that was kind of scary because that means there's going to be 40 of them. And I know that was a huge fear for some of our faculty members, 40 kids that need remediation in a class. But then I'll remind you, you get to see half of them at other times to work, and it's a lot easier to work with 20 than it is 40. It ended up not being as scary as we thought it would be. So some important class policies that you might be interested in. You need to seriously consider your attendance policy. A lot of kids might figure out real quick, I just need to come to the college algebra part. This foundation stuff, meh, I don't need it. And they'll just stop coming. So we asked, can they be dropped from both of the courses or just one? At UCA before, students were not allowed to drop themselves from intermediate algebra. They were stuck in the class. They could withdraw completely from the university, or they could earn a letter grade. And so now that this is paired with a credit-bearing class, and the credit-bearing class they could technically drop themselves from, what were we going to do? Is there a benefit from an attendance policy? Personally, I think so, but you may disagree with me. So that's all good things to consider. And then what do you want your attendance policy to be? Here's ours. All right, a student may be dropped with a permanent grade of a W for non-attendance when their absences exceed 1 week of regularly scheduled class meetings. And then in addition to that statement, we have this statement. So if, and I'm just going to paraphrase, but if a student is dropped from the foundations course, they're also going to be dropped from the credit-bearing course and vice versa. So their absences in the transitional piece directly affect their absences in the credit-bearing piece and vice versa. They have to stay enrolled in both. And that's just because they're transitional students. And everyone in our department follows this. Grading policies. And this is, before we get into this, I want you to go back and kind of think to some of your answers you might have thought about with some of the questions Keith was asking. Who's going to be teaching this course? Are you going to be teaching the credit course, or is someone else going to be teaching the credit course? Because that has some serious implications on how you want to determine your grade policy. How are your students going to be assessed? And where are you going to assess them? Are you going to only assess in college algebra, or do you want to assess in foundations? Are you going to want to have homework and tests in foundations and in college algebra, or just in college algebra? Personal experience, and we've been to a lot of conferences and sat through a lot of these things. The best way to completely overwhelm your student is to tell them that they're now in 2 math courses with 2 sets of homework and 2 sets of exams. That completely overwhelms them, and quite frankly, I don't want to come up with that many assessments. So we decided that we were not going to have any assessments in our foundations piece. All of the assessments, all of the grades will be in college algebra, and then we do what we call link the grades. So we have a grade policy on our syllabus, and I've got a copy coming up in a slide in the future. But it just says whatever grade you earn in college algebra, that's the grade you're going to get in foundations. It makes our life a lot easier. Now, will there be actual assessments in the developmental course? I give grades on days that are technically foundations days. It just means I have one grade book. So I record it in a single grade book, and that grade gets recorded for college algebra, and then the same identical grade gets reported for foundations. So it's not limiting. You can still do worksheets in foundations, you can do quizzes, you can do all kinds of things. It's just going to go into one grade book. And the big thing about why we decided to do that, hopefully I'm not giving this away in a future slide, was we sat down and we had this debate over, because it gets really sticky when you talk about C's and D's and F's. If they pass the credit-bearing course, we did our job. We got them through their math. So we had no problem with them passing the foundations. But what if they failed college algebra? Or what if they made a D in college algebra? If there's separate content in foundations and they could have gotten a passing grade in foundations, should you let them pass that transitional piece? Well, we felt that if our job is to get them through the credit-bearing math class, and we didn't, we couldn't, in fact, give them a passing grade in foundations. So that's how we landed on the grades need to match. And everything that we do in foundations, grade-wise, needs to be mirrored in college algebra. So here's our grade policy. The grade in foundations will be determined by the grade in college algebra. That is a student receiving a grade of A, B, C, D, or F in college algebra will receive an identical grade in foundations. Very straightforward. All right, so now we're going to give you some samples of what a 5-day schedule will look like, and then a 3-day schedule. And so on your faculty schedule, it will kind of sort of look like you have 2 college algebra classes. Now, we just randomly picked these times. So let's say you've got college algebra that's going to be Tuesday, Thursday at 12:15. Now, I've got them separated 20 and 20, but it's the same location. It's all one group of kids. That's your one class that is 3 credit hours in our faculty load. Half of that class will meet you Monday, Wednesday, Friday at noon for their foundations of college algebra. That's just 20 students. That's another 3 credit hours in your faculty load. And then the other half will meet you for foundations, let's say Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 1. And so to get 40 students through college algebra and foundations, it takes 9 hours of our faculty load. That's 1 credit-bearing course with 40, and then 2 foundations courses with 20 each. And of course, you know, you've got hands-on kids doing math 5 days a week. A 3-day schedule would look something like this. You would meet Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 9 with all 40. 20 would meet you the immediate hour after class at 10. And then another 20 would meet you Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 11. I have taught 3-day a week in the springs. It's not too bad. Sometimes college algebra from 9 to 9:50, followed up with the foundations from 10 to 10:50. It's just a little bit much. I love 5 days a week. I'm selfish. I just love 5 days a week. Some issues that we found with this, I don't think these are really on the slides, but it's kind of important. We didn't think things through a whole lot in the beginning. And so if you have one foundations after the college algebra, you're going to want to put both of them after college algebra. On the flip side of that, this example shows foundations meeting after. You could just as easily have your foundations meeting before, but you would want both of them to meet before your college algebra. It can get very confusing if one of your foundations meets before and one after. And I think we even had one faculty one semester with some last minute changes that ended up having a Monday, Wednesday, Friday college algebra, a Monday, Wednesday, Friday foundations, and then a Tuesday, Thursday foundations. And that was a nightmare. So I don't suggest you do that. It's very easy to get caught up in what your classroom will allow and what the schedule will allow, and not necessarily what the student's going to have to do when you're doing this. And so Keith has been really, really great at being able to see the whole picture. He can put a schedule together better than anyone. I have to have pictures and drawings with circles and things.
Maybe go into, she did a lot of the work on why we now have the same faculty teaching both sections for our math especially. So what were some of the issues that students saw with having different faculty?
That's true. So in fall 2016, I worked with another faculty member that I have known for years. We actually have the same set of guided notes that we use. We use the same homework sets. We have the same educational philosophies. Like, we're very similar. And so I thought, oh, this will be easy. Let's pair up. So she taught the college algebra section that had all 40 kids, and I taught the foundations that only had 20. And so real quick, the 20 students that did not have me, that were just non-transitional students, caught on really quickly, hey, why do they get to have this other person help them? How is that fair? And then the kids that had me, because I wasn't teaching them scary math, I was helping them figure out scary math. And so it kind of gave me a different rapport with the students than the actual teacher. So we had kind of this informal, I'm helping you figure things out, we're getting down and into the nitty gritty of math relationship, which they were way more comfortable with than the other faculty member who was a more formal lecture type. And so the kids would be coming to me and going, why can't you teach us college algebra? And it was not a good situation. And it's super easy for someone to make one quick change in lecture, like, oh, we're going to push that test back, and then it affects what we're doing in foundations. And luckily, we were right next door to each other, our offices, and we communicated on a daily basis. And it was still difficult to coordinate all of that. And so I could not imagine having to coordinate that with someone who's in a different physical location, like our writing faculty. Kudos to them, because I don't think I could do that very efficiently. And so we both agreed that it was not a personal thing, but that we wanted to try having our own pairing to ourselves, and it just works so much better. Yeah.
So just some interesting perspective on doing that. We know we've heard that from other places, and we paired in the summer, I guess you and I did. So summer was just a little bit different, but in the fall and spring, it can add to the challenge.
And so I think the reason he and I were able to pair, and it wasn't to the detriment of the students, was that it's summer and I didn't have anything else to do. So I would sit through his entire class, his credit bearing class, and then he would go, all the non-transitional students would go, and then I would stick around with the transitional students and help them through the homework, because I wanted to make sure that I was consistently enforcing his methods and his preferences. You can't do that in a regular full semester.
Yeah.
There's just not enough time.
Yeah. So that's what we have for you guys. Any questions?
There's a lot of information we just threw at y'all.
Yes, we know it's overwhelming and lots of things to decide. Like we said, we've landed on non-commingled, same faculty teaching both sections for our math. Now our writing is still two different faculty. Same thing with our reading. They use two different faculty. We are unique in the state anyways. We do pair our reading course with a gen ed course, and we like to use high failure rate courses, history, philosophy, and they're talking about a couple other psychology, some other freshman level courses that they're wanting to pair that reading course with, and they're having really good success with doing that. So we're not as versed on that. I'm becoming more versed on what they're doing, but I don't know exactly their ins and outs of how they're doing that, but they are getting a high percentage through both the transitional and the gen ed course by pairing those two together. So it is very promising, and I'm hoping that we'll start having those guys share that out on the national stage as well. So what else do you guys have, or do you have anything?
Hey everybody, thanks Keith, thanks Leslie. I will say this to the group. I said it last time, these guys don't bite, so feel free to ask questions, get engaged in a conversation. So it's open up for dialogue.